Hello, my name is Michael Keane. I will be talking you through my visual journal of an illustration using pen and ink. This is part one of assessment 2 for teaching the curriculum senior secondary visual arts assignment 2. So this is using studio practice to critically design a model of pedagogical practice. For this task, I am a working artist, or I try to be a working artist, and I was commissioned by a local band here to produce an illustration for one of their songs. So I thought that would be a good way to show to students that art exists outside of the classroom and that I myself am engaged in the art community in a very real sense. So I'm going to begin with, I discussed with one of the band members what they were after. The song is called Beer Bingzan, which means cheap beer or economical beer. And the idea behind the song is that Hanoi and Vietnam is becoming a little bit gentrified, with people preferring imported beer and craft beer rather than the local cheap working man's beer. So that was the concept of the song. They wanted me to illustrate that. So I came up with this sketch, which has a drunken gentleman called Chet Chos, which is a Vietnamese version of, in Australia, you would call them a bogan, I guess. Sort of a working class, a bit rough around the edges sort of character. So he's there passed out, holding up a glass, surrounded by cigarette butts, sunflower seeds, and a typically Hanoian plastic stool nearby. And I will use Saigon and Beer Hanoi cans for the text as they're mentioned in the lyrics. So as I said before, Beer Saigon, Beer Hanoi are very working man beers. So that's why I thought that would work so well for this illustration. So here we have our Beer Hanoi on the right hand side. On the left hand side is my sketch of the redesign, paying particular attention to trying to match the lettering, and so that at a quick glance someone would be able to understand that the Beer Hanoi was the reference point. Moving on, the next one is Beer Saigon, the original label on the right, and then I have my redesign using the sirens of Ha Long name on the left. I have adjusted the Sabeco logo in the center of the original label here to represent a stylized map of Vietnam. Okay, I mentioned before Chet Cho is a part of Vietnamese culture. As usually teenagers to men in their early 20s, covered in tattoos. They like to give off a very rough and burly exterior. I think the Australian equivalent would be a bogan. On the left hand side at the top you can see a picture of Ca Bang, very famous Chet Cho here in Vietnam, and the picture below is just of a very typical the rooster style haircut that a Chet Cho would normally have. On the right hand side are just some of my concept idea sketches of what that haircut, what the facial expression could look like. I was quite aware of cultural sensitivity, not being Vietnamese, that I didn't want these to look like a caricature or offensive in any way, but I did still want them to be humorous and light-hearted. As part of my research, I went out and just took some photos from around the streets of things that I wanted to include. On the left-hand side, we have the blue plastic stool that is ubiquitous in all of Vietnam. Any restaurant or beer hall that you go to will be littered with these as the only form of seating, so I wanted to include that. And on the right-hand side is just an alley wall near my house. I thought it's very interesting, especially the way it's sort of deconstructed, falling apart. Visually looks interesting, and this is the backdrop for 80% of Hanoi's alleys. They look like this. And on the right-hand side of the photo, you can see stenciled advertisements, just spray painted with a phone number Again, these are all over Hanoi and Vietnam, very recognizable to anybody who's spent any amount of time here. Okay, so I started producing the picture after making the quick concept sketch and the beer label explorations. So I measured it out. One of the stipulations when I spoke with the band that it did have to be square to match their social media requirements. So I measured that out. The next part was sketching in all of the elements and just checking that they fit within the square and that they sort of made sense together and they were in proportion. So moving on from that, I added some of the background detail. On the sides, you can see the spray painted advertisements that you would see on the wall, bit of the deconstructed wall as well. And I've started doing the layout for the beer labels with the kerning and the typeface. This is something that I often struggle with, so I like to spend time at the beginning to get it right rather than find that it's wrong at the end of inking. So here is when I have begun inking. So on the left hand side is the completed Beer Saigon / Sirens of Halong beer label with the stenciled advertisements in there. And there is the plastic stool on the right hand side. This is the bottom of the illustration, just filling in the tattoos and the detail of the gentleman. You can see written there is Zarding, which is a very common thing to see tattooed on people in Vietnam. It means family. Family is very important here. Snake is a sign of virility. We have the star for the Vietnamese flag. So a few cultural touch points there. Lotus, that's to represent a lotus there as well, which is ubiquitous everywhere in Vietnam. And a common trope with Che Chos is to have lipstick tattooed onto their necks. So I included that there and put my name inside a beer can to get my little copyright on there in as least obvious way as possible, I guess. Yeah. Okay, so I have completed the main elements of the illustration here. You can definitely see it is coming together. And here is the completed piece. Unfortunately, because of lockdown, I haven't been able to get a professional scan done as yet. So I did this myself with my mobile phone. I used a filter to try and sharpen up the image and to remove any shadows. And I think I was pretty successful. Okay, this is the work as used by the client. I did say before, I haven't scanned this properly, but they did want to release like a preview on Facebook. So this was what they uploaded. They have applied some sort of sepia filter to it. I don't particularly like it, but they're the client. They do like it, so it's up to them. Okay, so I would like to talk about some pedagogical links, how this could be used in the classroom. One way is that you could have students create an illustration based on their favorite song or piece of music, and it could be showing a literal interpretation, as in my one with the cheap beer and the drunk man and the beer labels, or it could be a more figurative one, maybe an emotion or a memory that is triggered by when they listen to that song or music. Another way to connect it to the classroom would be to create a work following a design brief. So they need to follow certain limitations when they are creating something, which would also be useful after they leave school. If they are going to follow art as a career, more than likely they will encounter a design brief and will have limitations put on what they will need to make. Another idea would be redesigning packaging to reflect an art genre or different cultural viewpoints. I think pop art would be a great one for this. Redesign soup cans, not in the style of Warhol, but obviously that would be a very easy way to take that. You could take a soup can and say, okay, how would a Vietnamese person reinterpret this? Just some ideas there to move this into the classroom. Also wanted to talk more theoretically about pedagogy with cultural awareness. So I have a quote here that culture is a complex concept, but for our purposes, it is the catalogue of shared heritage, beliefs, customs, traditions, values, artistic expressions, symbols, and conventions that bind people together and underpins their identity as a group. So as I mentioned before, I was very aware of the cultural significance of that beer holds in sort of the working culture, also other cultural elements, the spray painted advertisements that you see everywhere, including the tattoo of the star for the symbol of Vietnam. I was also very aware that I am a semi-outsider observing Vietnam. So I had to be respectful. I wanted it to be whimsical and light, but also respectful of the culture. Can also link to Studio Habits of Mind through Express. I'm expressing my ideas and beliefs through using visual language, and could also make an explicit link with Observe through my use of reference photos by actually going out and observing my environment so that would reflect that correctly. I assessed myself using the SACE assessment rubric. I assessed myself only on what was included in the previous slides, not in this narration. So for practical application, I've assessed this as a C. There is some exploration, but there's only one medium. Only pen and ink is used. I guess you could include photography at a pinch, but I think there would want to be more exploration in there to score higher. For knowledge and understanding, I have assessed this as a B. There is knowledge. There are some cultural connections noted. I think this could be noted much more explicitly, and also much more explicit notes about why visual artistic decisions were made and why. For analysis and synthesis, I've assessed this as an E, because there's really no connection to other artists' work, no mention of art genres or any sort of understanding of previous art history in those notes. That's why I've marked that quite harshly. For inquiry and exploration, I've assessed this as a B. I think there is some self-analysis and awareness through the creation of this piece. I have other references here that I used. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.